And hello, Bills Mafia. That red light is on, which means that this week's episode is officially live. And guess what, folks? The Buffalo Bills take down the Pittsburgh Steelers to the tune of 31-17 in the wild card round and advance to the divisional round where they will now be facing their, I guess you can call them, longtime rival in the Kansas City Chiefs for Patrick Mahomes' first ever playoff road game. And joining me tonight to go over the Steelers game as well as the upcoming matchup is of Trainwreck Sports, the one and only Mr. Mike Bundt. Bundt takes, you know him so well. I am very excited to highlight this victory and preview this playoff matchup with him. I appreciate you all so much for joining this week's episode of Under Review. Let's go.
Previous play will go under review.
And once again, everybody, Bills fans, non-Bills fans, thank you all so much for being here on this week's episode of Under Review. My name is Joe DeRosa, and you can find me on Twitter at @show_DeRosa for some nonsense tweeting. I am Cover One's self-proclaimed golden doodle. And joining me today is the one and only Mr. Mike Bundt. Mike, thank you for being here. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. I'm excited to be on the show, especially after a Buffalo Bills playoff win. And we're getting ready for that Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, part 3 in the postseason. Can't wait to talk about it tonight.
I can't wait to talk about it. It is a matchup that has brought us equal parts joy and equal parts trauma, but it felt like with the way that these two seasons were going for those teams, it almost felt inevitable in a weird way. But we can get to that in a little bit because to move forward, we have to look back. And what we're looking back on is something incredibly exciting. The Buffalo Bills take down the Pittsburgh Steelers 31-17, a game that felt like it was on its way to being a boat race, and then kind of does the average 2023 Buffalo Bills saga, which has become incredibly close and nerve-wracking. And then the Bills find a way to win it and eventually pull away. So, Mike, the first thing I'm going to ask you tonight is just talk to me about your feelings on this game, things you like, things you didn't like, and things you hope the team can carry with them as they go into this matchup with Kansas City.
Yeah, I thought the Bills played really well last night. Got off to a tremendous start, 21-0 lead. Turning point, obviously, the Tyler Bass blocked field goal. That gave Pittsburgh life. It gave them some momentum going into halftime. But outside of that play and a few moments in the second half, I really thought that the Bills controlled this game. Their offense was clicking when they were moving the ball with purpose. There was a few stalled drives at moments, but I really didn't get the feel that at any point that they were going to lose this contest. Great game by Josh Allen, connecting with his tight ends. The running game was solid. I know a lot of people don't like to credit the running game when the quarterback plays a big part of it, but playoff football in Buffalo, that's the running game. And then the defense, it wasn't an A-plus effort against a pretty mediocre Steelers offense, but for the most part, they did their job despite being undermanned, and they did what they needed to do. And now the question will be, can they step up? But there was a lot of things to be encouraged about last night.
I agree with you. And we can talk about the injuries more in depth a little bit later, but just to start it off on a positive note, there's a lot to like with the way the Bills played, and I'm going to start that with Josh Allen. So his final stat line ended up being 21 for 30 on completions, which ended up being a tune of 70%, 203 passing yards, plus an additional 74 rushing yards, 4 total touchdowns. He received a 121.9 rating. He had the game that we expect from Josh Allen in the playoffs. It's what you've grown to know from him in the wild card. And with the way that the season was winding down, you saw inconsistency from Allen, and I have been his biggest critic. And you saw that there was this kind of worry about consistency and whether he was going to figure it out as they ended up, one, competing for the division and eventually winning it, but now going into the playoffs. But it seems like he carried with him the poise and a lot of that decisiveness and a lot of that high caliber play from the second half of the Miami game into this Pittsburgh game. I mean, I saw it right off the bat with that throw to Kincaid downfield on the opening series. That was a throw that he looked tight. He looked focused. He got it in the perfect spot, right where Kincaid could get it, where the defender couldn't break it up. And when I see those throws, I'm extremely encouraged. And he deserves a ton of credit for how he played an efficient game. His legs were of a huge value to the Bills. That 59-yard run was just mind-numbing in the best way possible. I mean, I watched it live and I see him going and I'm like, all right, Josh, like good job. Let's slide now. And he doesn't slide. And I'm like, oh no, he's going to truck himself into somebody. But then when he got the angle on that DB, I don't know who was trying to break up the play, and he had the lane, I was like, oh my God, he's going. Like, he's actually gone. I cannot believe this. And that was just like a microcosm of this game for him. But you brought up rushing, and yeah, James Cook, 79 total yards, average 4.4 per carry. Ty Johnson had a few meaningful runs at the end of the game that really bled the clock down. This was a team effort, a concerted team effort where it felt like everyone got involved in some beautiful way. And then turning it over to the defense, they face a myriad of key injuries throughout this game, and you're starting to wonder if this is a game you're even going to survive. But credit to them, credit to the likes of Kyer Elam and to the likes of AJ Klein and the guys that really stepped up, because that was a huge performance from them in the face of adversity when your teammates are going down. And while it wasn't always pretty, 17 points is 17 points. And it might be Mason Rudolph, but that's a tough, well-coached team that you ended up taking down.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my opinion, Mason Rudolph is the best of the three Pittsburgh quarterbacks right now. I know Kenny Pickett is the first-round pick, and that Mitch Trubisky is the guy that had all the hope back when he was drafted by Chicago. But to me, Pickett and Trubisky are very, very average at best. I thought that Mason Rudolph actually looked solid in his 3 games leading up to the postseason, and actually gave the Steelers the best chance at pulling off the upset. The defense, you have to give them props with all the guys that they were missing. The one thing that really kind of stood out to me is I thought the Bills' D-line was physical with the Steelers' running game. A lot of people thought the Steelers might have their way. I didn't get that sense. I don't know the final numbers, but I know Najee Harris was held in check. Jaylen Warren had a few solid runs. But for the most part, the Bills' defense took care of business. And what I think is the most interesting thing this year about this Bills' defense is when you look at the deeper numbers like DVOA or EPA, it really hasn't been one of their best defensive seasons when you compare it to the last 3 years. But you look at the points per game allowed at the end of the day, and they're still holding teams in check on a weekly basis. And that's all that really matters. How many points do you allow? And when the Bills take the field, they hold teams to under 20 points a game more often than not. So that they got the job done. And then offensively, the biggest thing to me is this rushing attack continues to be effective, which really makes life a lot easier for Josh. And I think that is when they start clicking on all cylinders. Can they put up 40 points when Josh is throwing it 35, 40 times a game and putting up bombs? Yeah, that's fun. That's exciting. In the playoffs, in these elements, I enjoy having a run-first attack that doesn't force Josh to do too much. Keep getting 5 yards on first down, 6 yards on first down, because you know what you're doing then? You're setting up situations in second and third and short where you can do almost anything on any given play. And I'm telling you, no defense wants to go up against the Bills when they have all the options available to them, because James Cook is finding holes. Khalil Shakir is emerging in the passing game in the slot. Dalton Kincaid has found his groove. And look at Dawson Knox now getting involved, making some plays, finding the end zone. And then there's a guy by the name of Stephon Diggs that is a threat to make a play at any given moment. So I think right now, this is the Bills' offense that is the most dangerous version, especially in playoff time in these type of colder, bitter weather conditions.
I firmly agree. And I made a point a few weeks ago. It was kind of reiterating what Steve said on Air Raid, but this is a team that's built for this type of event now. I mean, in years past, it really did feel like while we could effectively run, we got away from it, or maybe we didn't really have the bruisers or the kind of east-west type runners or the guys that could hit outside, really dynamic playmakers like we do now. I feel like James Cook and even Ty Johnson add to what is already a threat in Josh Allen when it comes to running. You don't need to overtly rely on Josh Allen's legs, but because you have to respect the capabilities of these other backs, and because now RPO becomes an even bigger threat with these guys, Josh Allen's legs and his running becomes a much bigger factor. And you saw that on display against the Steelers. And when you talk about this defense and how they've been since really the midpoint of the season, I've gone back and looked, and they're a top 10 defense in every passing metric, but not great in rushing defense. Yet against Pittsburgh, they hold Jaylen Warren to 38 yards and they hold Najee Harris to 37 yards. Now, granted, Jaylen Warren got a few big runs off and averaged 4.8, but they did a pretty nice job of keeping their top two in check, with the other additional rushing yards to get the Steelers over 100 coming from Mason Rudolph and George Pickens. So it was a nice effort from the defense despite the banged up nature. But yes, you're seeing the recruitment on offense of other additional people. Khalil Shakir stepping up really anytime he has the ball in his hands. His yards after catch is on full display, and how you're seeing him shine in these huge moments when you need him is so encouraging. But again, you look at guys like Dawson Knox and Stephon Diggs, who didn't have the craziest game metric-wise, but still came through in very big moments when you needed them. And that's what you're expecting from the Bills in the playoffs. And truth be told, you don't necessarily need to have an 100-yard receiver or a 100-yard rusher. You just need to have effective players at key positions that can get you those first downs, that can extend the drive. And most importantly, at least in my eyes, extend plays and make things easier for Josh Allen to be more efficient, which is what I think the Bills did beautifully in this game. Sans a couple of series, because Josh Allen, with only 203 passing yards, was still incredibly effective. And you were seeing a game where it wasn't all on him, and it didn't need to all be on him. And when you can do this in the playoffs, I think you're going to have success. And granted, you're going up against a very tough opponent coming up, but it's still very encouraging to see them play kind of what I felt like was a more complete game and compared to weeks past. And while it wasn't the prettiest and there are things to clean up, I was very encouraged with what I saw. But I do have to talk to you, Mike, about the one thing that has to put a dark cloud on this game, and that's the injuries. And it sucks that we have to talk about it, but there were some notable injuries in this game, and mainly with Terrell Bernard. Obviously, going into the game, you didn't have Rasul Douglas. You didn't have Terrell Dodson. Now Christian Benford gets hurt. Now Balin Spector gets hurt. You saw a scare with Stephon Diggs and James Cook and Connor McGovern. Thankfully, I think they're going to be able to play because they came back in. And Taron Johnson goes into concussion protocol. So just talk to me about your thoughts on these injuries and really like anything you could see the Bills doing defensively to pivot from all the hurt that they've suffered.
Yeah, so the injuries suck. There's no sugarcoating what's going on, especially if Bernard is out on Sunday. We'll see. Right now, they're saying day-to-day. It doesn't seem likely he's going to play this Sunday. We'll see later in the week how things progress. But that's obviously a tough one when you're going up against Travis Kelce, and then you got Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. They find weaknesses. They'll exploit those weaknesses. So that's not a good one, especially when Milano's already out for the season. That being said, I do think the injuries aren't going to be the end of the world for this defense, like some are talking about it. I expect Rasul Douglas to be back this week. Mm-hmm. I expect Tyrell Dodson to be back this week. From what I'm hearing from people, I don't have concrete inside information, but those are two guys I would anticipate being back on the field. So you will get two starters back most likely. Taron Johnson, I know he's in concussion protocol. I was at the game. I saw him before he went in the blue tent. He didn't want to go in the blue tent. He tried to jog, do some movements. Even before he went into the locker room, he was watching the game before going in the tunnel. So I noticed some people talking about how he was with the team in the locker room following the win, enjoying the victory. So it's not normally likely for guys to come back from two concussions in one season in less than a week. So if you go based on past precedent, that would say he's out.
Right.
I don't know the severity. I don't know the situation. It seemed like just from watching his interactions that he is a guy that wants to be out there, that he wants to play. Obviously, it's not his decision. If Johnson and Bernard are out, huge loss for the middle of the field.
Yep.
Where they have to make up for it, is their defensive line and secondary, which thankfully they're healthy in those two spots outside of Taron Johnson. The defensive line is going to need to get pressure either way. If they're not going to get pressure on Mahomes, it's not going to matter who you linebackers are because they're going to get exploited. No one's holding up Kelsey for an extended period of time. So you need your defensive line to get pressure. And with me believing that Rasul Douglas is back and that you at least have Dane Jackson across from him, I think you're healthy enough in the secondary where you can mask some of these issues at linebacker if you get Dotson back and then you mix in Dorian Williams or however you want to go about it. Yes, there's the decline. But if there's a guy that can work miracles with his position group, it's Bobby Babbitt.
Yep.
Whoever he puts out there ends up looking like the next great thing. So I'm not going to say that Dorian Williams is suddenly going to look like the greatest thing ever if he plays Pat Mahomes. But what were we expecting from Balin Spector against Miami? And what were we expecting from A.J. Klein just coming back to the Bills this past week? We weren't expecting anything from either of those guys, and suddenly they go on the field and they excel. So what that tells me is as much as these players are great, a lot of their success can also be attributed to scheme and certain traits that Bean and McDermott target for certain positional groups. So I don't want to overreact. I'm a little worried, but I also think they'll have a plan.
Yeah, they'll have a plan. And I think it's a different look at a team when you're talking about a team going into a game hurt with a group of players that had a week to prepare, knowing that they're going to get the starting role, versus players dropping out from injuries mid-game and kind of having to pick up where they left off in the middle of a game. There's a huge change in pacing with that. And you kind of saw it when Taron Johnson left and you had Cam Lewis filling in on the slot. He didn't look in his place. And I mean, I don't really blame him. It's asking a lot when you're talking about replacing one of the best nickel corners in the league. But it is unfortunate to see all these injuries and see them happen kind of one after another and see the results where you're kind of looking at how Pittsburgh is seeing the middle of the field presence getting kind of dwindled and attacking it instantly and seeing how yards are getting picked up and first downs are being sustained and they're moving down the length of the field when they were kind of having trouble with that all game. And that's something that when you go into Kansas City, or at least I'm so used to saying that, when Kansas City comes to Buffalo, they are not going to Kansas City.
Buffalo.
They are coming to Buffalo, but I've had to say that for the past, 4 years? So, I mean, I apologize. They're coming here, but you have to imagine that considering the state of the Chiefs offense right now, which has been very much kind of a methodical attack because they haven't been as successful as they have been in the past at taking the top off the defense. And you talk about Patrick Mahomes looking at Rashee Rice, who's been very good with yards after catch and being kind of that get the ball in his hands quickly and let him move. And Travis Kelce, who obviously works the middle of the field almost better than anybody in the league. These are injuries you have to be mindful of, and it definitely worries me. But again, given it, we don't really know what the landscape of it's going to look like, but you are getting Rasul Douglas back most likely by his proclamation, according to Tim Graham. And you're talking about people saying that Terrell Dotson could be coming back. I think that they have a fighting chance to at least be competitive in the wake of the injuries. But I did want to bring something up because you brought up Taron Johnson. So Banged Up Bills, who is excellent. If you guys don't follow him, I promise you it is the most worthwhile follow you can make when it comes to just Bills injury news and updates because he studies it so extensively and provides really good information. But talking about Taron Johnson's concussion, I'm going to quote him verbatim. Players who suffer a repeat concussion in the same season miss a median of 12 days compared to single concussions, which is a median of 9 days, and initial, which is median of 9.5. He has managed to clear concussion protocol within a week the 4 previous instances he's been concussed. So it's that information. Shout out to Banged Up Bills again. Give him all the credit. Please go follow him. That information is so conflicting for me because it's on one hand, yes, they have not come back. It usually takes 12 days for a repeat concussion sufferer to have to go through the process. But on the other hand, Taron Johnson seems to have brain matter that recovers faster than anybody in the league to be able to go into those spots. And one thing that I know Ryan Sullivan's pointed out and you brought up was, he's on the sideline running around. He's trying to get back in the game. They're not letting him. He's watching the play. He looks very alert. And then in the post game, when you see the speech, he's there in the locker room with them, under the bright lights, moving around, yelling with his teammates. And I know serious concussion symptoms, you're not really trying to be exposed to bright light or loud noises. You're usually trying to go in the dark and not deal with that. But this is something that, if you're talking about it from a holistic, just vibe standpoint, if you want to, it's encouraging, but we have to wait and see. And I do think it's a big blow, but let's get a little bit more into kind of how this defense can pivot, because we did talk about the injuries, but now, you're seeing this loss and whoever comes back, if it's Dotson, if it's Douglas, if you do have somehow by the grace of all that is good, Terrell Bernard end up playing. Like, Mike, what do you think is the defensive structure following these injuries, and how do you think it could look matching up with the Chiefs?
Yeah, so defensively, I think a lot of things can say pretty much the way you do things. I know there's going to be a drop off if you don't have Terrell Bernard or Taron Johnson out there. Personally, I think Taron Johnson's going to play. I have no inside information or anything. From speaking from the vibes perspective, what you were talking about after the game, the fact that he was pleading to stay in the game. I know, yes, all players are going to want to stay in the game. It looked like he thought he was okay. Now, who knows how he is today? Who knows how he's going to be tomorrow? But if you see him on the practice field later in this week in the non-contact jersey, I'm going to have to believe he's just waiting for that clearance. Now, we'll see if it happens or not. Early in the year, none of these players were getting cleared after a concussion and playing the next week. Late in the year, it's been quite a bit different. You're starting to see more of these guys get cleared. Ty Johnson got banged up against Miami. He's back playing this next week against Pittsburgh. So
that's true.
Obviously, you want to put player safety first and foremost, but it really just depends on the severity of what his concussion is. And then when you get Dodson back out there, this is going to sound strange based on how we were all talking about Tyrel Dodson prior to the season, but I do get a little bit of a comfort level if he comes back. He's had a solid year. He's been really good. I don't want to say that I love having him out there. I'd rather it be Milano and Bernard, but I think Dodson has been a serviceable starting linebacker this year. And if you can put a Dorian Williams next to him, I think you can get by. I don't think it's the end of the world. Now, I could be completely off, but I think you can get by. To me, the biggest keys in this game is going to be getting a sustained pass rush. Ed Oliver has been a beast at generating pressures. The worst pressure for a quarterback is the interior pressure. You got Ed and Daquan in the middle. Kansas City didn't go up against Daquan the first time around. That could be absolutely devastating to the KC offensive line. To me, that's how you make up for these losses. You just don't give Mahomes any time at all. And then with having Rasul Douglas back in the secondary, that's like just bringing back a guy that's been close to an all-pro level this year, coming back to your secondary. This is not the same old Chiefs offense that we're used to talking about. As much as people want to talk about all the injuries on the Bills offense, on the Bills defense, pardon me, it's not like the Chiefs have a million guys on their offense to be scared about right now. This is a Chiefs offense that going into, I think, the final game of the season was averaging 22.5 points a game, down 7 points a game from last year. DVOA, they're 8th overall. They have not been as effective in almost every aspect of their offense since losing Tyreek Hill and losing their offensive coordinator to Washington. So I do think there's ways of slowing this team down, especially on the road in Buffalo. Crowd noise will be a factor, and I think there will be ways to keep them in check. Now, will they? I don't know. We'll see. But I do think there are ways for this Bills defense to have success on Sunday.
I agree with that. I just want to pull this funny comment up from RJ real fast, which says, can we all find out where the Chiefs are staying the night before and blast every horn, pull fire alarms, and find ways to keep them up all night? That deserves all the disadvantages. That's some mischievous activity right there, but that'd be really funny if I found out that people were trying to do that. But there's security for a reason. I don't think they're going to let you guys in. But no, I think the defense, yes, I agree with everything you said, and mainly the pass rush point, because I think that's really where this defense has to kind of eat now, because their D-line's healthy. Right? They have all their depth there now. They have Daquan Jones back. You obviously have Ed playing at a very high tick. You have Rousseau, who had a very nice game against Pittsburgh. Leonard Floyd's still playing. AJ Epineza still playing. Shaq Lawson's still playing. Linval Joseph has been getting involved and had some nice reps. The D-line is still, in my opinion, the biggest strength of this defense, with the secondary not far behind it, with the addition of Rasul Douglas and emergence of Christian Benford. Now, I don't know what Benford's injury looks like as far as severity and how long he could be out, but I do foresee the cornerback room, should he not play, still being viable, because I think Dane Jackson's play has been very good this year. And Rasul Douglas, like you said, has been at an all-pro level, and I firmly agree with that. And he was snubbed personally. But the D-line is where this team's got to eat. If you can generate pressure with a four-man rush, I think you're going to have a lot of success, even if you're playing with a banged up front seven, with your linebacker core kind of being guys that have to step in on a short notice, because you're taking a lot of pressure off. And I've made this point so many times when I talk about linebackers on this show, but taking pressure off of their plate, not allowing Dorian Williams to have to do as much or think as much, because you're talking about maybe Pat Mahomes tries to get the ball out quick and there's not a lot of separation and Williams just has to make a tackle. Or maybe there's so much pressure that Mahomes can't really survey the middle of the field and has to throw it away. Like, those are the things that I think will alleviate the strain of all the injuries you faced. And while I am annoyed that it is the middle of the field where I think Kansas City is going to attack mainly, I also feel a little bit of encouragement knowing that we still have the interior pass rush to bring that we didn't have last season when we played Cincinnati, which I felt was a huge flaw in how we attacked them. It ultimately was a huge part of the reason that this defense struggled and eventually lost the game. So I could absolutely see them kind of running things as is. If Taron Johnson plays, you can't ignore his presence. You got to stay nickel primarily. But I also could foresee them trying to pivot to a bit of dime. Not obviously, you can't do it all game, but maybe allowing Jordan Poyer to continue coming up. And if you have Taylor Rapp, being able to bring him in, because we haven't even talked about Taylor Rapp and the severity of his injury or when he could come back, but it's unknown right now. But if you do get Taylor Rapp back, I do think that that does benefit you, because you can allow Jordan Poyer to come up, or you could have Rapp come up, and you could have one of those guys add to a pass rush, where if you want to get that fifth rusher and rely on a safety to man that middle part of the field and take that away from Mahomes, you might have success with that. So that's really what I could foresee. But the injury report's got to be more clear for me to have a true accurate gauge. And it's frustrating that report's going to look longer than the Star Wars intro this week. But it is what it is, man. We have to deal with it. And Sean McDermott is a good defensive coach. I foresee them still getting their licks off in Kansas City and getting some pressure home, being able to hit him a couple times, being able to force some errant throws. But one thing about this defense, and Mike, let's pivot a bit more to our matchup here, I will say, is that they're an opportunistic bunch. They are a defense that generates turnovers. They did it. Should have been 3 times yesterday with the Elam interception, the forced fumble, and then, of course, the phantom fumble. Do you want to call it a ghost fumble? Whatever it may be. The one that should have been a fumble. And you can tell that, no matter who's hurt, no matter what ends up happening, they generate a lot of opportunity for themselves. And in a game where you're playing Kansas City in Buffalo, Patrick Mahomes' first road game, that is a solid recipe to get Kansas City to reel a little bit and really take control of this game. So let's talk about this matchup, Mike. I mean, you could start with offense or defense, but just give me some of your initial thoughts before we dive into the specifics of it.
Yeah, so I think this is a coin toss, even matchup, both sides. I give the Bills a slight advantage. Honestly, without their injuries, if the Bills were a completely healthy team, and when I say completely, I mean they have Milano out there. They have Bernard, everybody, all their key contributors. I think I would pick the Bills 70% of the time these two teams play in Buffalo. The way it stands right now, I think it's a 50-50 game that could go either way. I still think the Bills have a slight advantage, though. Just looking at, first of all, Adam had a great tweet earlier that Kansas City's defense allows an expected 10.8 more points per 60 plays on the road than they do at home. That means their defense really struggles away from Arrowhead. And it makes sense. When you have the crowd noise, when you have opposing offenses confused, you can time out your aggressive blitzes whenever you want to bring guys, and you can put opposing quarterbacks under duress. On the road, it's not, you can't do that. You don't have the home crowd at your back. It's a lot easier for those offenses to be able to hear and do what they need to do and move the ball effectively. So I think the fact that the Bills have already beaten Kansas City 20-17 in KC would tell you that the Bills should be able to have even more success offensively in Buffalo than what they did the first time around, which tells me Kansas City is going to have to find a way to score against this Bills defense. They're going to need, I believe, 24-plus points in order to beat the Bills on Sunday. Right now, The over-under is around 45, and I believe the Bills are favored by 2.5. That means Vegas is saying right now they think the Bills are going to win like a 24-21 game. So Vegas does not expect this, or at least the early numbers say they don't expect this to be an offensive shootout. They don't expect this to be a touchdown back and forth, who has the ball last. They think this is going to be more of your average, typical football contest in 2023. So I like the matchup for the Bills offense. Defensively, I'm worried because of the middle of the field. I don't know who's going to be out there, but I'm not worried to the point where I'm like, how are we going to get stops? Because the way I look at it, as I said with the injury report, if you get Dotson back, you get Rasul Douglas back, you're really only minus 2 starters. You're minus your linebacker, and then you're possibly minus Taron Johnson. And I think Daquan Jones being back in this game far outweighs the loss of Bernard, in my opinion. I know that might sound crazy to some, but I think Daquan Jones being back is the biggest, is a bigger addition than Bernard is subtraction for this team. And I know people are going to say that's wild, that's out there, but you just look at linebackers on this Bills team. They plug in place. Like whoever goes in at linebacker ends up looking like a stud. I think a lot of that is scheme fit. I think a lot of it is coaching. I think a lot of it is finding guys that fit their system. They don't have another Daquan Jones on this team.
No.
And how do you get in Mahomes' head? Get that pass rush. I don't know how KC's going to be able to contain Daquan and Ed. It's the same thing. Cincinnati didn't have to face that last year. Kansas City didn't exist in Buffalo a couple of years ago. I think that is the matchup to winning this game. Interior pressure. And because when you have Daquan on the field, not only do you know you're going to get the pressure and the pass rush, but he's going to be a beast in the run game too. So I think winning the D-line is going to determine if the Bills win or lose this game.
I agree with that. Defensively, it's going to be a defensive line. Again, I alluded to it before, but I'll say it again. When you're talking about facing Patrick Mahomes, that's how you beat him. And that's really how you beat any of the best quarterbacks in the league, is winning with 4, because that's obviously going to create pressure for a quarterback. Even though you have everyone going downfield, everyone's covered, and then you're talking about still being under duress. So Ed Oliver, Daquan Jones, Gregory Rousseau, Leonard Floyd, those are going to be the guys. They have to step up. They have to play a really good game because, again, it'll make everything easier for the remainder of your defense, where I think the secondary is still quite stout, and the middle of the field that needs the help can get it. But one thing that I will say about the Chiefs is when you look at their record, or not their record, excuse me, but their metrics offensively since week 10, right? So we're talking about EPA, DVOA, things that I feel like are stats relevant to their performance. And we've all talked about how the Kansas City Chiefs this year aren't exactly the same level of effective as they've been in years past, but I decided to look it up. Since week 10, which was Kansas City's bye week, and this includes the wild card game, which they fared really well in and ended up putting up 26 points, they're 15th in dropback EPA. As far as dropback success rate, they're currently sitting at 17th. Then you talk about rushing EPA, and this one I think is significant for the Bills, who have been a team that kind of struggles to defend the run. And when you're talking about navigating the length of the field, if you put them in those spots, they're sitting at 19th in rushing EPA on their offense. So these are metrics since their bye week that are middle of the pack. These aren't exactly earth-shattering numbers. Now, Kansas City, and I'm stressing this because this is not to be meant with anything other than the utmost respect, Patrick Mahomes is never a quarterback you bet against. Never. Because I've always talked about what have you done for me lately. I've always talked about what matters, and what matters is tangible results over years, over time, accumulation of success. You never bet against Patrick Mahomes. He's going to be competitive. This offense is going to be competitive. This defense is going to have their hands full because you just naturally do when you face them. But seeing these metrics gives me a lot more encouragement for how this defense can kind of structure itself and attack Kansas City, knowing that they're not generating as many explosive plays, knowing that there isn't a Tyreek Hill that's going to go vertical and have to take the top off, but rather an MVS who has been inconsistent and has had drop issues akin to the rest of this team. I think that Kansas City is going to be able to move down the field. I foresee it happening. I think that the quick hitters, the yards after catch, the struggling of tackling because of the backups in place that might not have the speed, that's going to allow them to move down the field. But where I think it's key is how they do in the red zone when everything is compressed. And you're talking about this secondary now matching up with them in closer space and maybe being able to jam them up or disrupt them and not get that timing off. And if that happens, I could absolutely foresee this being a game where Kansas City might have to opt for a good amount of field goals and things stay attainable for the Bills offense. So when you talked about Vegas, Mike, and you talked about 24-21, I could absolutely see a low scoring effort. And another part of that is because on the offensive side of the ball, you talk about the Bills and you talk about, well, our defense is banged up, and you talk about this Chiefs defense. So again, when we look at the Chiefs defense stats from week 10, their bye, so how they've really done over the second half of the year, drop back EPA, their defense is 7th in the league. As far as success rate, they're 2nd. So they are defending quarterbacks incredibly well. And that is mainly because of their insanely good cornerback duo. You talk about rushing EPA though, and this is why I think it'll be low scoring, Mike Bundt, and why I think that you could be encouraged for James Cook, Ty Johnson. Their defense is 16th since their bye week in rushing EPA against. So teams are running on the Kansas City Chiefs, and teams are able to get down the field and run with it. But when you get to those situations where you have to get to the end zone, can you convert? So I could absolutely see this being a really tight matchup where both teams are moving down the field, able to get their shots off, but finishing drives is where I think both teams could potentially have problems, mainly because of things tightening up. So, Mike, do you agree with that, or do you foresee just kind of a different overall back and forth with them? I know you mentioned the Vegas line, but is that what your heart's telling you, or does your heart tell you something different?
So my head tells me the Bills are the better team. My heart is conflicted because, like you, I have a philosophy: never bet against Patrick Mahomes, especially in the playoffs. So, but I've never seen Patrick Mahomes in the playoffs on the road before. So I really don't know if it looks much different away from Arrowhead or not. What I will say is this. I'll talk about their offense, then I'll transition to their defense with some of these EPAs. The Kansas City Chiefs offense was not good this year by their standards. They had an abysmal season by their standards. They were an above average offense overall compared to the rest of the league. But if you were to ask, say you put all those numbers and you assign them to the Minnesota Vikings, and that team was playing the Bills this weekend, would I be shaking right now? Would I be nervous right now? No, not at all. I wouldn't. I'd be like, all right, whatever. They're okay. They're decent. But then you tell me Patrick Mahomes, you tell me Travis Kelce, Isaiah Pacheco, and then Rashee Rice, and then I get a little nervous. But based on what they've actually done this season, I'm not nervous about it. And I think I don't want to take too much credit for myself or give myself credit, but I think I was one of the people that saw it a lot earlier in the year than most. I've been talking about this probably since like week 5 about what's going on here. They're not really scoring like they're normally doing. Things look a little bit off. And I know everybody wants to say that Andy Reid is an offensive genius. And I give him credit. Like, he's an offensive mastermind. Wait one second. I'm just trying to look something up quick. But man. I think it is kind of telling that Eric Bieniemy leaves the Chiefs and suddenly they go down 7 points a game. Like, everybody wants to say, well, it's just because they don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. Well, they didn't have Tyreek Hill last year, and they scored 29.5 points a game and won a Super Bowl. This year, they had to scrape to 11-6, and a lot of that was because of their defense. So I think there are a lot of serious questions about their offense. When you struggle over a course of an entire season, I think it's not just something small that you can easily get out of. I think there's enough ample evidence that, like, they are what they are. But the fear is that at any moment, Pat Mahomes is a snap away from going back to his Hall of Fame form and getting on a hot streak and putting you to sleep. So there's always that fear, like, well, what if Pat Mahomes just finds it this weekend? This is a playoffs. He's going to be good. But evidence would say it's probably not going to work out that way. Now, when you talk about the Chiefs defense, that defense is elite. Like, no doubt about it. They had a great season. That defense is the reason why they went 11-6 this year. Not that offense. You put that offense on a bunch of other teams with shit. Almost swore.
You can curse. It's okay.
With bad defenses, they might have missed the playoffs on certain teams. But this is a very good defense. But what gives me encouragement is the thing that gives the Bills the most problems with their defense is their pass rush. And that's at Arrowhead when they have the crowd behind them, when it's hard to communicate and things just aren't going your way. This game is in Buffalo. It should be an environment that is conducive to Josh having success. You factor in the Bills are able to run the ball lately, whether that be Ty Johnson, James Cook, Josh Allen, and now that they're kind of maneuvering the ball throughout their playmakers, they're not just dependent on Stephon Diggs. They're letting Kincaid be involved down the field. They're letting Shakir get yards after catch. Knox is doing his thing. I really think this matchup favors the Bills. Now, I could be completely wrong, but if you were just to ask me on paper, like, who should win this game, the answer is Buffalo. And the metrics say it too. ESPN's Football Power Index gives the Bills a 56.5% chance of winning this game. So we'll see.
Yeah, I hadn't looked up any of the lines. I hadn't looked up any of the odds. I never do. Like, for me, it's all just about, like, what am I seeing on the data? What am I seeing from the teams recently? And that's how I base my opinion. But I'm glad they're confident in us, even though everyone went down on defense. That's really nice of them to prop us up a little bit. But listen, I'm going to say, really, I'm banking on it being low scoring. And my reasoning is it's just every time these teams have played each other since the 13 seconds debacle, that's how it's gone. These teams play each other very tight. They're McDermott and Andy Reid have seen each other enough times where they know each other's tendencies, and it's vice versa when you talk about Josh Allen looking at a Steve Spagnuolo defense. They know how to defend each other now, and I think we have a big enough body of work where I could believe that that's going to happen again. But yeah, when you talk about the spread, you talk about the odds. The one thing that I will say that I have been hanging my hat on, again, we can go back to Adam's tweet talking about the 10.6 on the road. This is Patrick Mahomes' first time ever going on the road in the playoffs. And that is something that, like, even though he's been in the league for as long as he's been in it, and we all know the quarterback he is, there is that part of me that just wonders how much that's going to change things, because he's so used to a playoff environment at home where he has the crowd behind him, that how much does that disrupt things? How much does that disrupt your communication? Because here's the thing. Bills Mafia gets loud at the stadium. We all know this. They got plenty loud against Pittsburgh. You mean to tell me you don't think they're going to be the loudest they've ever been when Mahomes comes to town for the first time since 2020, and it's the first time when fans are in the stadium? I think it's going to matter. And I believe it was Daniel Harms of Cover One now, who talked about this because he follows the Chiefs. And he was talking about how a big thing for them is Jawan Taylor and how that tackle hasn't really exceeded their expectations given the contract they give him. He's been serviceable, but you talk about him and you talk about the potential for miscommunications. I think that could weigh on them a little bit. And I think those are the little things that you might see in this game that could wind up making it a closer game. If that were to happen, maybe in the red zone on a key third down, and all of a sudden they have to settle for a field goal. So I know a lot of, like, again, I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes. I think Mahomes is going to play a good game because he's the best quarterback in the NFL. And I know what they're made of, and they're the team that's done it before twice. But I really do think that these teams have a read on each other to a point where it could be low scoring. So that is my take on it. And I appreciate your take, and I'm very excited to see what ends up happening. I want to talk, before we sign the show off, about specific matchups, really just the things that we can get into with the nitty gritty of it. But before I do, Mike Bundt, I have to ask you a very important question. And that question is, do you like fantasy football?
I love fantasy football.
Oh, that is so great, Mike Bunn. I am so glad that you answered that question, because I want to tell you about the easiest way to get some action on the NFL, and it's Underdog Fantasy and their pick'em game. Just pick higher or lower on your favorite or least favorite player stats, and you can win up to 20 times your money in a single night. And the playoffs are here. There are a lot of exciting matchups for you to choose from. Underdog keeps it super simple with their easy-to-use website and mobile apps. Pick between 2 and 5 players to fill out your pick'em entry. Get every pick right and take home some cold hard cash. Use the code COVER1 and get your first deposit doubled up to $500 by Underdog. And thank you again to Underdog for being a partner and sponsor of Cover One. And all of you here currently, I just want to first and foremost, before we get to the home stretch of the show, say thank you. We had over 120 of you get in here. That's awesome. I love seeing it. I appreciate you so much. If you could please do me a favor and like this video, share this video with your friends. If you have Bills fans in your life that need some Cover One content, it would be greatly appreciated. We have one more segment for all of you, so don't go anywhere. But before we get there, I have to let Greg and Aaron tell you all about the One Pass. Gentlemen, what have you got for us tonight?
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Yes, 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 yes. Please, I implore you all, if you are not a One Pass member, to sign up today. The link is in the description below. That One Pass, again, is the lifeblood of Cover One and allows us to get all of the resources that we use on a day-to-day basis to find data, to watch film, to be able to provide the insight that we do on these shows. It is greatly appreciated. And again, the premium Slack channel is something I encourage you all to check out if you are a member, if you are thinking about signing up. It is nonstop Bills discussion. It is as entertaining gets. There are great people in there with great insight. And as always, you get direct access to all of us. If you ever have any questions, comments, concerns, or you just want to say something mean to me if you hate my guts, that's totally fine too. I appreciate your interaction. All right, Mike Bundt, let's talk about matchups before we sign off tonight. I want to hear your biggest matchups in this game as we talk about what could be a very exciting game in Orchard Park. Who are the specific matchups you are watching as we take on Kansas City again in the playoffs?
Yeah, so the easiest ones that come to mind, whoever is at linebacker that's going to be tasked with taking on Travis Kelce, or however the Bills decide to defend him, that's matchup number one. Because let's be real, if you can find a way to neutralize Travis Kelce, this entire Chiefs offense is it's good, not great. But if you take down Travis Kelce, you can start to dictate the game a little bit. Number two matchup, find a way to block Chris Jones. Please don't let him wreak havoc in the backfield. Give Josh some time. Josh didn't have any time in Kansas City last game. That made life very difficult in the second half when the Bills were trying to hold on for dear life. Luckily, they were able to pull it out late. But I'd rather it not be something where the Bills are just desperately holding on. I really do think the Bills can win this game without it being something where we have to be praying for the Bills to score 20 points. I really do expect the Bills to put some points on the board on Sunday. And so those would probably be my two biggest matchups. The third thing I would say, this isn't really a matchup, but I'll make it a matchup. Josh Allen versus himself mentally. Josh, please be in a stable state on Sunday. Do not be too geeked up for this game. Calm, cool, collected, but not too calm, cool, and collected, because we saw what happened when you were too calm, cool, and collected during the middle of the season. Find that middle spot where you're taking that 6-yard pass on first down, setting up 2nd and 4, and then letting us move the ball. When the Bills are moving the ball where they're getting 5-6 yards on first down, it's almost impossible to stop them. Those are my 3 keys.
All right. I like those keys. And it's so funny that you brought up Josh Allen versus himself, because Uber said that last week too for this game. So that's very telling about Josh Allen's very sporadic play if we are talking about, hey, you versus you, bro. And not like, oh, you versus Spagnuolo and the blitz and everything. It's no, dude, just, hey, you see Diggs that he's double covered? Just don't throw the ball. Just don't throw the ball. Let's do something else. But again, my new thing with Josh right now, because during this matchup, everybody wants to compare it to Brady versus Manning, and everybody back then would always say, well, Manning's the most talented quarterback, but Brady is the GOAT because he wins Super Bowls. And I think
my new thing now is I'm kind of putting Allen in the most talented. Allen is more talented than Mahomes, in my opinion, but Mahomes has found a way to win when it matters. We need Josh to get this victory so we can finally start saying, yes, he is just as good as Mahomes, and not have people across the nation just laugh at us for pointing out the fact he hasn't been to a Super Bowl yet.
Yeah. And, I'm hoping that this could be the year. It's a lot to deal with when you're talking about our injuries and everything we went over in the matchup. But my keys that I'm going to look at, again, in no particular order, we already brought up D-line, so I'll just give a quick nod to that again. I think defensively, defensive line, 4-man pressure, if you can get it, that's something that you can use to stifle Mahomes, make his life a little more difficult, and ultimately end up giving you a lot of opportunity on defense, because putting him under duress, giving him stress and making him have to think about it, or not having the time to think about it if it's something long developing, and flushing him out of the pocket, keeping a spy on him, whatever you may have to do, let that pressure dictate the game. It worked a little bit when you played him the first time and you had some success, a few sacks early on. AJ Epineza made a great play early on in that game. I want to see the defensive line play its best game yet. This is the opportunity, and it felt like in each of our last 2 playoff matchups with Kansas City, one of the problems was that this defensive line really couldn't hit home and couldn't close, and that was frustrating. This is an opportunity now where you have your edge-setting guys with Leonard Floyd, a veteran pass rusher, obviously Gregory Rousseau, who has the ability to set the edge and take that lane away from Patrick Mahomes with his long arms, and of course your interior pressure, which I think is the best it's been under Sean McDermott. This is an opportunity to right those wrongs and have a great game, put Mahomes under duress, keep it tight, and give your offense an opportunity. When I'm looking at this offense, I'll agree with Josh Allen and himself, although this is a great point from who made this point. I'm going to find this. Sarah, yeah. He did seem pretty calm and cool yesterday, and the numbers back that up. He had a great game. I think Josh played a really good game and honestly navigated the pressure in the pocket really well. One thing that I don't think got talked about enough was he handled pressure in his face immaculately in that game. I thought he didn't get flustered too often. He didn't have to vacate the pocket unless he absolutely needed to. That was what we wanted to see, and I hope he can continue that in this game. So that is certainly one thing that I would like for this game. But when I talk about the offense, it's the tight ends versus this linebacker core, and really just this whole offense and their ability to generate short passing plays. Like when I'm looking at Kincaid, who has been with each increasing week, just more and more of a focal point. I want to see how he's navigating the middle of the field, because I know Kansas City's going to throw pressure at you, and I know Kansas City's going to try and man up. Beat that man coverage. Get open. Create that lane where you can fill the vacated spot for whoever Steve Spagnuolo decides to send at Josh Allen. Because if you can do that, I really do think that you're going to mitigate the effectiveness of Steve Spagnuolo's blitzing and allow yourself to get those chunk plays that you could turn into yards after catch opportunities, since the field is a little bit more spread out. And if you can honestly get them to kind of, bite it, not be able to hit effectively with the blitz, and you're punishing them for it, you might be able to work yourself out of some of these looks, but get them to pivot to pure coverage and create lighter boxes for Josh, James Cook, Ty Johnson, where you might have rushing opportunity as a result. So I would really like to see how this team navigates the middle of the field and really how they kind of counteract Spagnuolo's blitzing. But I'm really excited for the running backs in this game. I think that's my number one, Mike, and it might sound like not that sexy, or it might seem a little whatever. I really think that that is the key for the Bills offense in this game, because if you are able to run on this Kansas City defense and again, offer the opportunity for this offense to be in shorter yardage opportunities and run more effectively and create these opportunities for Josh, then I think you have a shot for a really big, efficient Josh Allen game. Now, I'm not blind to the fact that Kansas City defended them really well in the past, but you have a new opportunity, and it is the playoffs, and you don't know what a few more weeks of Joe Brady can really come up with as far as wrinkles to this rushing game. And James Cook was the thorn in Kansas City's side for the first half of that game. This is his game to really shine. And I think if you can get him going effectively, that's going to trickle into the legs of Josh Allen, the legs of Ty Johnson, and be a massive, massive point of emphasis for this offense against Kansas City. That could ultimately be the difference in you winning a game, and a tight one, which I think it will be. Those are my matchups. I'm pretty pleased with that. Mike Bundt, I'm pretty pleased with you. I really appreciate you joining me tonight, man. It's always awesome having you as a guest. You are always welcome back. People in this chat, thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate it. Mike, why don't you tell these lovely people where they can find you these days?
Yeah, so obviously right now I'm with Trainwreck Sports. If you're trying to find my content, I've been doing a lot lately. I'm all over TikTok. I'm on YouTube, and then obviously on Twitter. Same Twitter account that I always used to have, at Mike_Bundt, BUNDT. But if you're trying to find me on TikTok or YouTube, look up at underscore, actually, no underscore, at Bundt Cakes. Rhymes with Bundt Cakes. Trying to grow this YouTube channel of mine. So I do appreciate any subscriptions on YouTube. Not trying to compete with Cover One or anything, but basically a lot of hot takes, a lot of shorts on a daily basis. When I'm at a Bills game, I'm posting a quick preview. I'm posting a quick recap. When there's stuff going on involving the Bills, Sabres, UB, anything Buffalo sports related, I'm putting content out there. Approaching 100 subscriptions right now, and just under a month and a half of doing it. So appreciate anyone that checks it out and checks out any of the content. Would greatly appreciate it.
100%, guys. Please go check him out. I told him before the show went live. I follow Trainwreck on Instagram, and I saw Mike was, Mike posting on there, and I saw, him at the Bills Stadium, and I'm like, they can't contain Mike Bundt. They can't stop him. He will bring you the scoops from wherever he feels like bringing them to you, and that's all that matters. But I really do think that Mike's work is valuable to the space. I think there's room for everybody in this space, and Mike does great work. So follow him on Twitter. Check out his YouTube channel. He's more than deserving of it. And Mike, again, you were a great guest. To all of you in the chat, again, thank you so much. We topped out, I think, at like over 130 tonight, which was super awesome to see. I really appreciate all of you coming here on a Tuesday night, hanging out with me, hanging out with Mike, really embracing me in this new time slot that I've taken over the past few weeks. It's been a lot of fun. We had a great playoff win on Monday. It was a lot of fun to see, but the real challenge starts now because Kansas City is coming to town. And let me tell you something. We've all been jaded by 13 seconds. We've all been jaded by some past failures, but this is a very big opportunity for the Bills to, really exercise those demons and come out with a big win. And you better believe that I'm going to be rooting for it, and we're all going to be rooting for it. So Bills Mafia, my message to you before I sign off is if you are going to this game, I beg you to be as loud as possible. I beg you to scream at the top of your lungs to make Kansas City's life a living hell. And please never let up. I don't care if they're up by 10 points. I don't care if the Bills are up by 30 points. I don't care what the scoreboard says, what it means. I need you to be loud. Make their lives a living hell. Let's go get this W, and let's get the hell on to the AFC Championship, and let's go get this ring because we all need it. We all deserve it. And it's long overdue. So Bills Mafia, go be loud and get it done. Thank you all so much for tuning into this week's episode of Under Review. I will be back next week, hopefully with the show that is as positive as this one. But for now, I give you a go, Bills. Take care. Enjoy your night. We will see you soon. Goodbye, everybody.